In this lecture, we are going to begin adding animations to our player by adding an animation controller. First, we must add the model to our game. Let me show you what I mean. In Unity, open the Player Prefab in Prefab Edit mode. Next, in the Game Assets/Characters folder, drag and drop the KKit character into the hierarchy. It should sit side by side with Bruno. The model is going to be larger than our player. Let's rescale the model to be the same size. In the inspector, set the scale on all sides to 0.3. If we zoom in on the player, the models are closely scaled to one another. The scaling does not need to be perfect. Through trial and error, I found that 0.3 is perfect. Moving on, the next step is to move the body parts from the Bruno model to the KKit model. Let's take a moment to view the child objects of the KKit model. In this game object, we have two child objects called Animated Character and Prototype Pete. Pete is a temporary placeholder for the animations. If we were to hide this model, the visual information for this object would have been hidden. The Animated Character object is responsible for moving the body parts around. Therefore, we can delete the prototype object and replace it with Bruno. If we don't move the character's body parts into these game objects, they will not move. The question is, how? To do so, we must unpack both prefabs. Right-click on the KKit game object. Under the Prefab menu, select Unpack Completely. This option completely converts a prefab into a regular set of objects. Let's do the same for Bruno. Next, we can delete the prototype object. Lastly, we can start transferring the game objects from Bruno to our animated objects. Drag the Character Barbarian Arm Left object into the Arm Left object. The names will correspond to one another. Next, drag the Character Barbarian Arm Right object into the Arm Right object. Afterward, drag the Character Barbarian Head object into the Head object. Lastly, drag the Bruno object into the Body object. By transferring the objects into the animated character, the body parts of the original object will become animated. This process may not always be the same for all models. You will have to talk with a team member who handles animations for applying animations to your objects. We followed these steps since those were the instructions given by the original creator. If you're interested in the entire process for applying animations, check out the resource section of this lecture. I provide a link to the official instructions for using animations with the models. There's one more thing before we start adding animations. We don't have a controller. Let's click on the KKit game object. Under the inspector, an animator component has already been added. However, the controller field is empty. We must create a controller and attach it to this component. In the Animations folder, create a new animation controller file. Let's call it Character Controller. Next, head back to the KKit object from the hierarchy. Let's select the Character Controller file as the value for the controller field in the Animator component. We're ready to start adding animations. In the next lecture, let's begin adding animations from the model.